session. With that said, as a result of executive session and our A1, our A3, and our A4 in regards to legal advice and instructions from legal counsel, Resolution 2019-8 was formulated and discussed, and it reads to the effect: a formal resolution of the governing board of the Sedona Fire District recognizes the appointing of Chief Coyle to the position of Assistant Fire Chief, authorizing the temporary modification of certain policies, and authorizing a pay grade and payment of certain benefits with grammatical modifications as discussed. With that, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 2019-08?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion?
Get it in there.
All in favor of the approval of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Any disapprove? The motion is passed. Resolution 2019-08 is approved. Thank you. Okay. In our regular business meeting section of our agenda, we talk about our public forum as the first thing up. Do we have any comments from the public?
I have not received any requests.
Okay, thank you. Our consent agenda, we have the August 20th regular meeting minutes, the executive session minutes. We have 3 resolutions for the update for the signer names on county accounts, which is 2019-05 to add Chief Troutwine. We have Resolution 2019-06 to update the signer names on the Chase bank accounts, which would be to add Chief Troutwine, and Resolution 2019-07, which is the update the signer names of the New York Community Bank account, which is to add Chief Troutwine. Those are all on the agenda, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any disapprove? Consent agenda has been approved. Next item on the agenda is our financial report and updates from our finance director, Gabe Boldra. Gabe?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Second month of the fiscal year is going smoothly. We are in kind of full swing on audit season, audit prep though, and we will have our on-site audit with the actual auditors end of October. So just kind of a little FYI to the board on that. Going into the financial report. There we go. Start off for the month of October. Our total revenue was $462,000. You'll see we are right in line with our projected budget for the month on property tax revenue. Non-levy revenue was over budget by $225,000. 2 big drivers for that. One is our ambulance revenue. We actually received $286,000 in ambulance revenue last month, which was $118,000 over what our budget was. And we also saw $82,000 in wildland revenue for the month of August. So those are the 2 drivers on the revenue side.
Can I ask a quick question? Is
Yes.
it okay? So that ambulance revenue, was it payments from like back payments coming in, or did we just have that much action?
Our volume is up rather significantly over
Okay.
over what our historical averages have been, and so that's why we're seeing the increase in revenue on the ambulance
Okay,
side.
thank you.
On the expense side, total expenses are just over 1.5 million. Personnel was over budget for the month by 51,000. A large percentage of that is overtime related to the wildland deployment. So again, wildland is one of those ventures that we send units out on, and we're not only reimbursed for their time out there, but we're also reimbursed for our backfill while they're gone. So although it does cause us to go over budget, there's a revenue component of that offsets that cost. The remainder of our expenses, you could see our other major categories were under budget for the month of August: buildings and land, vehicles and equipment, communication IT, as well as managerial. A lot of that's a function of timing. We typically are a little slower on spending early in the fiscal year. And that's, a lot of that is from, habit, from historical habits. But, and also usually I don't like large purchases until we see our first half taxes. So that's kind of why we usually see that early on in the fiscal year. Year to date, total revenue is at total revenue is at 848,000. Our budget at this time was 528,000, so we are 300,000 over budget. Again, big drivers between that are our ambulance revenue and our wildland revenue. So that's continuing through for the first 2 months of the year. On the expense side, total expenses are at 3.2 million, which is 100,000 over budget. And as again, we're looking at, when we look across our major categories, personnel is over, again, related to those wildland deployments. And then we are over on communications and IT, and that's mainly due to some large software purchases that occurred early in the fiscal year. So that's kind of, we're in line with where I expect us to be at this point. Percentage of budget expended to this point, 20%, with 80% remaining. Percentage of expenses, you'll see, and I don't believe I had the functional expense little diagram in the bottom left corner last month. So one of the things that my staff did is we put together an analysis of 20 districts throughout the state over the last 5 years and trended out their personnel costs, operational expenses, communications, and managerial. And allows us to kind of start looking at benchmarks on where our clients perform and compared to that statewide average. And we looked at some of the larger, more established districts when we took this average into account. And so right now you'll see our personnel is at 87% compared to that average at 81. That's fairly common in the beginning of the fiscal year, us being higher on personnel because there's no other spending going on, as well as a large part of our wildland season is also in the early part of the fiscal year. So that's what kind of skews that number a little bit. You'll see at operations at 11%, we're at 6%. Communications at 2%, we're at 5%. Biggest reason why our communications is a little higher is because we do have a larger telecom division than most other agencies. And then finally, managerial, we're at 2% compared to a 5% average. As we continue through that fiscal year, we'll continue to kind of monitor those, but it's information we felt that was kind of valuable to add. And we always get asked, how do we compare in other districts? And so that's part of the reason for starting to incorporate that.
So some of the outliers will have you smaller districts, for example. Incorporating them into the average kind of messes with the figures, I would think.
Right, so we evaluate that and remove certain outliers. But ultimately, though, we're looking at percentage of expenses as their total, compared to their total expense.
Right.
So you will still see relatively similar percentages.
Okay.
We're not looking at their dollar amount, so to speak, so it's not a weighted average to where.
So like Mesa and Golder Ranch and some of the larger ones.
We do have Northwest and Golder Ranch included in those averages, so we do have some of the the larger ones as well. Okay. Some gee whiz finance stuff there for you guys. And finally, kind of year over year, ended the month at 6.6 million in total cash on hand. Other assets at 20.7 million. And then finally, our long-term liabilities or total liabilities down to 23.5 million. So, yes.
Yeah, Gabe, I'm just, usually if our cash assets are a little higher than the previous year. Is there a reason why it's not quite that way?
I didn't, I'll look into that.
That was my very question, same question too, is that the comparison from where we are at currently to where we were last year. Well, you were with us last year.
Right.
And so we implemented a lot of the practices that we're now doing. So I could see where things would start to level off.
Right.
Rather than the big changes like we used to have.
Yeah. And so we do have a lot of leveling off, and even kind of comparatively, we've got a pretty level number, but I'll look into that a little more detail and get an answer to you. But yeah, we are seeing that we're not seeing those budgetary swings that we used to kind of have in the past.
Right.
So. All right. Any questions?
Nope. Any questions from anyone? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Need a motion for approval for the August financials. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion to approve the August financials, August 2019, as described. Do I have a second? Do you have any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? August 2019 financials are approved. Okay, next up on the agenda is our fire chief's report. Chief, you're up.
Thank you, Board Chair and Board, excuse me. Good evening. So we'll start with just looking a little bit at our NFIRS reports, or National Fire Incident Reporting System. So I know when you look down the left-hand column, what some of these how they're described, it may look a little unusual, but it is the national system we're following. So I want to highlight just a couple of those. One, when we look at our rescue and EMS, we've extracted the number. 51 of those 270 responses in August were interfacility transports. So that's a good number to look at and track. Also, another thing to note of those rescue and EMS responses in August, we had 24 backcountry rescues. So as you can see, over June, July, August, our backcountry rescues were up, and that's really become a real important response for us in the fire district, and we're having a lot of those. And I know staff works very hard to train and have the right equipment, so just make a note on that. I'm guessing that, you know, we're getting through vacation season, so that number may drop next month, but we'll see, or this month, I should say. So again, just the totals on there for our subtotal for August, we had 393 responses. If you look at the comparison last year, we were at 229.23 total responses up to date, and now we're at 2938. So we're actually trending about the same amount of responses. And then again, on the monthly totals, we had another 10 mutual aid responses, so that got us up to a total for this year 3,011 with 3,013 last year. So it really interesting, you know, our call volume staying about consistent right now, at least through August. So when we look down at our urgent call times, and again, they're urgent call times, emergency response times, because this is with lights and sirens. So when we're looking at that information, we're not looking at information where it's a service call where the rig does not have to go with lights and siren. So that 90th percentile in our responses, 90% of the time, our response time is that 10 minutes, 31 seconds. And then you can see the average response time is 8 minutes and 1 second. So moving down to the next graph, which is a really good graph depiction of when we look at response time. So of course, there's several elements in that response time. One is the alarm processing. The other element is turnout time, which is the time it takes the firefighters after they receive the alarm to get to the apparatus, put on the proper protective gear, and then respond. And then the third part of that graph is the actual travel time. So you put the alarm processing time, the turnout time, the travel time, and that gets our total response time, which is the number at the top. So for August, that's how we arrived at 90th percentile at 10 minutes and 31 seconds. So interesting enough, when you look at those areas, on the alarm receiving, you know, Sedona Fire Department isn't receiving those alarms, obviously, right? It's the police department, or it's our alarm center direct, depending upon where in the district. So we don't have a lot of influence with that, other than making sure we come to the table with the group that, you know, manages the alarm center and have those conversations, how we can improve that. When it comes to turnout time, though, that's something that we can, we look at the data, we track it, and then we decide on ways we can improve that. So sometimes certain things extend that turnout time. For example, how the station's designed. If you have to go down from the second floor to the first, you know, it's a lot longer to get to the apparatus. So, but turnout time is an area we always want to keep aware of as firefighters. That's one we're going to always try to come up with solutions on how to shorten that turnout time. And then, of course, the travel time, we do have maybe a little bit of control in that it's up to the officer and the engineer to pick a good travel route. So that's familiar with the community, familiar with the roads, familiar with the time of day when it comes to traffic. If the 179's backed up and you have an alternate route you could take, you probably want to take it. So the only influence we have on the travel time is that, right?
Yeah. I'd
Sorry, I
like-
picked the
yeah,
179.
I'd like to know which one it was.
Yeah, yeah. I said if, yeah. So there is a little bit, but unfortunately, the roads are designed the way they are, the traffic flow is the way it is, and the calls come in when they come in. So sometimes, and you could see it, there's a spike there. Sometimes the travel time is inflected directly by that traffic and how the road designs are. So, in terms of long-term planning, those are the discussions you could have at the table, but right now, it is what it is. Yeah, you had a question?
Yes, Chief. In looking at the 90th percentile graph, which is so useful, are the time for each of these categories you just talked about is pretty similar to last month.
Right.
And yet the overall emergency response time got up to 8 minutes, which it hasn't all year. And I'm wondering why.
Which month are you looking at?
I'm looking at this current, the month of
August,
August. We have
okay.
an 8-minute, 0.01 seconds.
Oh, okay, on the average time?
Yeah,
Right.
it bumped up quite a bit. And
Yeah.
yet, when you look at the breakout, you don't see why.
Right, and another month was June, right? That was at 7:38, right? So that kind of bumped relative to the other months. So,
Yes.
some of the issues might be the vacation time. There's summer months, so we might be getting into some traffic flow issues with those, and that's why it ebbed up. Again, it depends upon the time of day, what the traffic is at the time, where the calls are coming in. So, yeah, we could even get a little deeper on that and look at that and analyze that. So, but yeah, what's interesting is we should see, like with our budget, we try to flatten it out month to month and try to, set ourselves up. Kind of with response times, turnout times, call processing, if typically you'll start to see that same kind of trend. And then what really inflects that is, what parameters we pick in terms of the methodology and in terms of what's an outlayer. So in other words, maybe the officer forgot to go on scene verbally, right? So it looked out in the data and the CAD that it was a 24-minute response time. We know that's not true, so we discount that one. So again, we can get a little more in the weeds on that. But that's the point of all this data and looking at the responses. What are the trends? Where are we headed? And then what issues do we need to address? So if we see those travel times start to extend, then we have staff look at it and say, okay, why are they? And it could be maybe we went through a month of the serious construction, and we had a lot of calls around uptown or whatever. So good, thank you for that, pointing that out. When we have also the graphs there for incident responses by station. So you can see the higher graph there is really the total amount of calls that station ran, and then the blue column is how many were in that district. So obviously it shows, we're not just running calls in each of our districts, but we're backing up each other. And so that could be for various reasons, multiple calls in the district, or, maybe one of the ambulances in a long transport up to Flagstaff, so the other closest ambulance is going to have to respond there. But those are good numbers to look at. It shows very clearly, Station 1 and 3 are pretty busy. And that's the trend there. In terms of grants, I do, one of the most exciting grant I think we obtained here recently was this Assistance to Firefighter, or AFG grant, which is a federal grant where we applied for 80 mobile radios. So we were awarded that just recently. And I got to tell you, that amount of award, and by the way, the AFG grants, they're very, very slow at coming out this year. They're way behind schedule, and I don't know why, but when we were one of the first awards, and that's exciting to me. That's a huge amount. This is going to be a very definite impact on our radios, on our ability to communicate, on bringing us to a more current level with our technology there. Most of the technology out there in the field, especially with radios and communications, it's about a 10-year shelf life. You know, it's like you buy a new computer and within 6 months there's a newer computer or a cell phone. Well, with the radio technology, a lot of it, it's about a 10-year. So you look at your replacement, and it's a high dollar item. In this case, our radio technology is pretty outdated, but this is going to give us the ability to update it, and that's an exciting award. I know the match on it, I believe, was 5%. You can see that 16,000. So we're gonna be able to get 85 mobile radios, essentially for our matching portion, which is 16,000. So I know Chief Cole was a part of that. A big player was Captain Ojeda. And I know I even watched him. I know he's excited because I watched him come in off duty and help Gary get online so we can accept the award, right? We don't want to blow it, right? We got it. And did anyone accept it? Yeah, we did. So, but he came in and worked, and I know there was a lot of staff that supported that. So I think we need to pause and congratulate staff, those two individuals, but also the rest of the staff that helped, and because that's a huge award for us.
Yeah,
That is a huge award. So,
Chief,
yes, sir.
delivery time?
I don't have the whole mapped out schedule yet. I know what I think is good is there's been a lot of legwork done on what radio we are going to by staff already. So this isn't going to be, we're already in the process. We've looked at what we want. We know where we're headed. So then it'll be a matter of following our procurement process, getting everything lined up. And the key then on these grants, especially the sizable ones, you got to make the timelines. So I think we're already a step ahead by already have done the legwork on what technology we're after. You know, if we were starting from scratch and having to do our research and development, and then I think the timeline squeeze a lot quicker than you think. I don't know when the actual sunset date is on this particular grant. They usually give you plenty of time, but we're well on the way. And then, you know, staff will look at that and they'll map out a process and a plan.
Thank you. Question.
Yes, sir.
For my own edification, modern technology for these type of radios, what benefits or what's new in these radios other than maybe they work when others don't work?
Yeah.
Are they
Yeah.
cell-based?
Well, no, they'll hit our infrastructure typically. You know, communication system, it's one component, right? Because you need the towers and you need the ability to hit the repeaters but they're more hardy radios. Sometimes with firefighting, with rescues, we get in a canyon, you're dragging through a river, you're rappelling off rocks. They're going to get banged around, so I think this is a radio that's going to be able to take a beating and still work properly. They like to improve not only the electronics in it, but the antennas. Those are an important component on it. So it's like, you know, we're improving the technology in it. We're improving the antennas. We're improving the hardiness of the radio. We're improving the longevity of it. So hopefully, you know, an end game will be clearer radios. A lot of times they design them so they can improve the technology. So with gloves, they're easier to operate. So where they put the control knobs and how you switch channel. Sometimes it's hard in gloves, you know, and at night or in smoke. So I guess the term would be ergonomics. So the radio will have improved ergonomics technology. It'll be more hardy. The antenna technology keeps improving. So all those components, just a better radio, and hopefully we'll get better reception. And it's one component of your whole communication system, right? I mean, you need infrastructure out there we can get in a canyon or in an area that we don't have great reception. But that's geography, and to overcome that, you build towers and put big snow cone looking things up in it that the people don't like, but it makes it so we can communicate better. So that's all a bigger picture as we move down the road. So,
Thank you.
yep. So, and then just to finish off the grants, we put in for a grant for $30,000 there for a trail rescue vehicle. So knowing we do have 2 UTVs that we use for our backcountry rescues. I want to say those are probably 4 or 5 years old, I think, off the top of my head. But so we're always looking to improve our equipment, and so this may be an opportunity to get another new vehicle that would be very useful for us in our deployment. You can see though our portion there, 52,000, so it's very expensive to outfit. So we applied for the grant portion for the vehicle, and then, you know, we would have to map out a plan for outfitting it. And it would be obviously ALS capable. I know probably one of the high dollar piece of equipment out is the monitor, the cardiac monitor. Those can be 25, 30 grand, 35 grand. So you look at 52, well, a large portion that's probably the cardiac monitor, I'm guessing. I haven't looked at the full analysis, but. And the last grant we put in for was for a drone. We have a drone program, and that was in the amount of 33,000. And we don't really have a matching portion with that if we obtain that, but they're obviously, whatever the maintenance would be for that drone over the time, we would incur that in our budget. All right, so just to highlight a couple training things that we accomplished. We partnered with the police for some leadership training. You know, and I gotta admit, I wish I was here for this leadership training, because this FBI LEADA leadership training, I've done some research on it when I was working in the National Fire Academy on some research, and this is a great leadership training. So we had 60 students from 18 agencies. So Sedona Fire District and Sedona PD were able to partner on shop, and that kind of leadership training, bringing it here in our community, I think is very good. So that I think that's a noted highlight. We had 2 more firefighters checked out on our helicopter rescue with DPS. So of course that's consistent with our mission with our backcountry rescues and how we're deployed. And then we had quite a bit of staff. Chief Mazulis was one of them that went down to Phoenix for our software training. Now, the RTA fleet management software, this is what we, Chief, about 6 months ago, we were able to start implementing this. Now, when we talk about apparatus, I know we have a board communication coming up about that. One of the issues is what kind of data and analysis do we have on the repair and maintenance over time. So we really haven't had the ability to track that very clearly, at least empirical data, right? Maybe anecdotal. We can say, oh, this is a general. So this software is enabling us now to really track that carefully. So as we acquire apparatus and map up our apparatus replacement, this affords us the opportunity to look at that area and get really good data. So I'm hoping that moving forward, as we get more clear data on the repair maintenance, we're tracking that apparatus better, and it gives us the ability to make better decisions moving forward. It's a good one to highlight. And then also, we still have several employees working on degrees, and then you can see the number of classes, 145, with the number of attendees, 640, and then total training hours, 1644. So training obviously is extremely important to us, and we're able to continue to move that forward. With our community risk reduction, I know our fire marshal's gonna have a report too, but just to look at some of the inspections, our current community risk reduction fire inspections, we had 93, company inspections 9, life and safety system inspections 94, and then 36 plan reviews. So we're doing very good moving that forward. We have here in the packet just also a thank you note from one of our residents that we responded to, and I just want to read one of the nice comments. Your quick and knowledgeable response that got me to safety and helped me to help save my life. So these are good notes. Again, a good pause to note, why are we here as a fire district? It's for public safety, and we're deployed out there to respond, to meet the needs of the citizens, and in this case, even save a life if we have to. So that's very nice of the citizen to take that time to write that note, but it accentuates really what our troops are doing out there on a daily basis. So in terms of significant incidents or events that we've had in this last month, one of the things that was really noteworthy, and it got a lot of press, was the fall we had up at Slide Rock. An 8-year-old female, she fell 75 feet. So we, of course, responded and enacted that rescue. But I think, you know, she survived, and I think the outcome is a lot of factors. But that's a long fall, and that's a young person. And I think it brought a lot of attention to the Slide Rock area, where there's been a lot of attention recently. And we look at our backcountry rescues, we look at our technical rescue team and what's happening out there. But this was a big deal, And I wanna, you know, just compliment our troops for getting out there, making that rescue, getting the right care and getting her to the right facility to get that extended treatment. Also, another thing to note was over Labor Day weekend, got extremely busy for us. And at that weekend, on one point, we had 4 backcountry rescues happening at the same time. They were separate trails, and they're all within a 2.5-hour period. So I think, was that you, Chief, Chief Lukowski was, so I know he was probably tired, but it was tired just hearing it on the radio. So that's something, you know, when we have a busy weekend like that and everyone's in town and they're hiking on the trails, they're going 4x4ing. So this really accentuated the need for our technical rescue team and how we're equipped and deployed, because these are our areas and we had to respond. But that was a heavy commitment of staff on that shift for that 2.5 hours. And I think we moved up some help from other agencies just to cover for that period. So that's something we're sensitive to when we have to commit the majority of our resources for a while. You know, we make sure we exercise that mutual aid component so that there's someone here to respond for other service calls. So again, that's something to note. Yes.
Yes, Chief. I'm wondering, given the number that had to be responded to, was it, were biking accidents a higher, what was the makeup of the problems that our citizens ran into, or visitors?
Yeah. Very good. So the other significant thing I want to highlight is we deployed our new ambulance.
Yes, you did.
So again, and I know a couple board members were able to see that. Please, if you have a chance, go down to Station 3 and take a look. Again, compliments to staff. I know a lot were involved. Firefighter Payana and Bruglio, they were on the build committee. And then also, of course, our mechanic Mike, and then telecom Rich, and then Station 3 crew did quite a bit of work under the leadership of Chief Mazulis there. So compliments to staff, you know, building heavy apparatus and from head to toe, and then getting them deployed where they're functioning well in the field. That's a feat. So thanks, Chief, and all staff. But just a note to the fire bureau, that was a big deal to us. So please go take a look at it when you get a chance. So an update on our GIS position. We know we're in the process of filling that position, of course, with the retirement. So just quick highlights. In August, we put out a job announcement. We actually had 72 applications. 37 of those met the job description minimums. In September here, we proceeded with the testing and interviews. 19 moved forward to the written exam because of their relevant experience and education. And we have some Skype interviews coming up in the next week or two. And then the goal is oral boards in October. So hopefully then in October we can make a selection and fill that important position. So the position was well filled, and it's hard to see veteran people retire that are doing an outstanding job, but that's what happens, right? So, but we're hoping we had some really qualified people. So we're hoping again to pick the right person who has the right qualifications, and then we can continue growing our GIS and, you know, expanding our ability to collect accurate data so we can make good decisions, because that's really, you know, that's where we're all headed. In terms of Station 4 construction, I don't really have an update, but I will say this, meeting with finance, my compliment to the fire board and staff on continuing to plan for that. I had the opportunity to walk through the station recently. I'm trying to get to all the stations and look at the apparatus station. So I'm in agreement that we need to move forward with the project there. So and again, the fact that we're planning for that, and then we'll get staff on a timeline and we'll map that out. I think that's a good thing. But my compliments again to the fire board, to staff, to finance. I think fire stations and apparatus require long-term planning, And when people in leadership within the organization come and go every 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes we don't do the long-term planning. So the fact that we're doing it, that's the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to do with the revenue that we're receiving from the citizens. So I'm excited about that, and my hope is we'll get on a track, on a plan. We'll use that money we've set aside and just really, hit one out of the park with a really good project, and think about the functionality of it, and think about the longevity of it. Another 50-year station that will function where it needs to. So I'm excited about that.
Yes, and Chief, if I could just add, part of, besides the fact that the building is in disrepair, also with the redesign, we're going to improve our response times
Yes.
by getting our firefighters closer to their apparatus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. And with a modern fire station, you definitely have to take all that into account. And that's the hope that we will get a really good design. It'll be really functional, and it'll improve the service capability. So thank you. Thank you for that. Recently, we had our 911 remembrance ceremony, so thank you for everyone attending. I think we had about 50 people there, which was really good. And, Chairman Soto did the emceeing, but great event, great time to pause. And I think, as much as you would think having a 9/11 memorial here in this community wouldn't have relevance, it really does. So I think that was a good morning. So thank you for all attending. We do have an open house coming on October 8th. That's coinciding with our Fire Prevention Week. I'm sure our fire marshal will mention that. But we're going to do a pancake welcome. I guess we have a new fire chief. Oh, I guess that's me. But all they had to do was say pancakes, and I said what time and where. So that's at Station 3 at 7 in the morning if you want a pancake. But I will be there for pancakes. So in terms of just notes of POs over $10,000, we did have one PO that was about $11,000, and that was for Swift Water personal protective equipment. So what we were able to do is we have 6 technical rescue team individuals committed to each shift. So of those 18 members, we were able to get them current and updated personal protective Swift Water gear. So as we respond out, they can be a little more efficient in their response and get to the scene quicker and set up quicker. Instead of waiting for a vehicle to come out, then they all grab the gear. So I think that was a really good thing that we did. And that was within our budget, what we had planned for. So that's something to note. Let's see. So I think the last comment I have here in the chief's report is just on the social media outreach. So just looking at some of the numbers, we had new page likes. We had 208 in this last August, and that was up 65%. Our post reach, we had 65.7 thousand. That's a lot of people, and that was up 53%. And then we had 218 new followers. So the most engagement we had was that young girl that fell in Slide Rock, which isn't a surprise, but that had 38,000 hits. That's a lot. And again, some of the key messages we were able to follow up on was that fall. That was a big one. Also, that Labor Day weekend and those backcountry rescues, that had a lot of looks too. The 4 backcountry walkouts in 2.5 hours, that's a huge commitment of staff. It's very physical. So again, that was another one we looked at. And then no surprise here, just forwarding the ADOT information on our road construction and all those issues, up the 89 and I'm sure uptown. So people looked at that too. No surprise. So I believe that finishes the chief's report, unless there's any questions.
Yeah, Chief, I have a couple comments across the board there. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were on a roll, so. But first and foremost, I do want to formally thank staff for all their work in putting together these grants that we were awarded, that one in particular. So kudos to all the staff members who assisted in that. And it's just a show of especially to the public, that we do have the ability to gain financial assistance on the outside if we do the right work. And it was apparent that we did that time. As I looked at your report on the incident summary, and we showed the spike in the number of calls for backcountry for those 3 months in a row, it leads me to the thought of the ability to increase staffing, albeit for a limited period of time within a given day during that time span. Something to maybe consider down the road that may be a future agenda item, perhaps.
Okay.
A budgetary thing also. Rescue 3, the rescue down at Fire Station 3, without a doubt, is the shining jewel of that station. That is phenomenal. So if you guys do get a chance, go on down there and take a look at it. It's going to serve the community well. And I think that one of the things that's most impressive to me of that is that we've come a long way from the Ford Econoline front ends
Yeah.
chassis on these things, and this is a ton and a quarter, an F-450, yeah, which is, it just looks like a beast coming down the highway, and it's going to be there for a long, long time. So you know we got a piece of quality equipment coming down the highway. So again, thanks for staff, and I know the community's just going to, well, you never love seeing that thing coming down, but it's nice to know we have the right stuff. As much as we have our social media, and we're really hitting it out of the park as it relates to social media, there has been a noticed absence of Red Rock News articles, which I believe we get an article a month, perhaps, that we may want to see if we can still capitalize on. There is still there's a segment of our community that relies on the Red Rock News as opposed to social media that I sure would hate to miss that opportunity. And as it relates to the GIS replacement, are we looking at one individual or maybe a team of two, or keeping it to one?
Just one.
Just one, okay.
I believe the other two positions that we'll start to walk down we have a third IT position that we'll be looking to fill. And then the other position we're gonna evaluate that position, was related more to finance, but now, bringing on Gabe's firm and how we're kind of structuring that. So we're gonna look and see what that position really is. There was some absorption by other staff with those two positions not being filled now, responsibilities that kind of muddied roles and responsibilities. So we want to fill those. We want to look at cleaning that up. So that'll be one of the tasks that we walk down.
Okay, super. Well, again, thank you very much for your report. Is there any
And-
other?
Yes, I do, mainly to speak and thank our board chair Soto for, for the immense amount of work that you've put into not only the wonderful change of command ceremony and handling it so beautifully, with member Joy helping out. But in addition to that, the 9/11, to also putting all the time and effort to make it a very successful remembrance of 9/11. So thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. It was a pleasure to work with the board on these events. It's just it shows the community that this fire district is more than just the firefighters, that they're a big part of it. But as a support function, that's what we do. We're one big team, and any one of us would have been happy to do that. But thank you very much. Okay. With that said, the next item on the agenda is discussion, possible action for requisition 9132 for the purchase order up to the amount of $247,483.56 to Sanderson Ford for the purchase of fleet vehicles, presented by Division Chief Ed Mazulis.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. If I may, I'm going to speak to both the board action communications that.
That'd be
Thanks, Gary.
purchase order or requisition order 9132 and 9133.
That is correct. It's not going to work sitting there. Can you hear me? So August 20th board meeting, you requested staff return this month with more information regarding the purchase and planned capital fleet replacement of our vehicles. Specifically, you wanted to look at leasing options for the vehicles. And so, short PowerPoint, I'm not a big, long PowerPoint guy. As you remember, as I explained last month, based on our capital plan, we've identified the need to replace 5 vehicles this year. It is 3 Ford F-150 command type vehicles, a Ford F-550 mobile fleet service vehicle, and a mobile IT platform, which we've settled on a transit type van. With the command vehicles, and I know a lot of you know this, but they require lights and sirens and a decal package and radio systems to be compliant with the National Fire Protection Association and DOT specifics for reflectivity and lighting. And while they are recommended standards, most of the stuff we do on the operations side, we try to model the NFPA standards as much as possible, because they are just that. They're an industry standard, and it's not our way, it's the way, if you will. And the intent is to do, and we have the capacity to do, a lot of the upfitting in-house. And additionally, we've sourced local vendors for the stuff we can't do. The fleet service and IT van vehicles will be ordered specific to their purpose. And what that means is that the fleet vehicle is an F-550 chassis with what you've seen as a standard work body. It's a fleet industry standardized vehicle for fleet maintenance. And a lot of the direction towards the why we chose those vehicles was working in conjunction with Mike Sheehan in the shop. Again, looking at industry standard, and then a lot of the hard work Lance, our volunteers, put in. So that's kind of how we landed on these vehicles specifically. And all right, so purchasing options. I've learned a ton this month. I knew a little bit, and now I know a little bit more. We have budgeted capital dollars to purchase these vehicles. That's obviously one way to do it, is a cash purchase. Secondary to that, there's a whole host of municipal leasing options, and with municipal leasing options, typically they're lease to own options, and 3, 4, 5 year terms, whatever you choose. There are some lease purchase opportunities, particularly with the enterprise leasing solutions. And there's some misnomers. Municipal leasing, we do get a discounted rate over a standard lease that you would do walking into a dealership, because they're also called tax exempt leases, and that means nothing to us. That means that the lender recognizes tax savings on these. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I've heard some talk, oh, well, it's tax exempt. Not for us. It's for the lender. And so, but that's why they can pass on to us some recognized, reduction in interest rates. So those are the 3 basic options that we found is standard across the state and the country. And Gabe produced this chart just to outline the cost differences and broke it out into the vehicles. So essentially, you can see that the first column there is the purchase price, the cash price, and then there's a generalized lease to purchase option at 3.85%, which is about the going rate. And then the enterprise lease program. Now, knowing this board so well, you're wondering why it's almost $100,000 more to do the enterprise lease program, correct? Joy's giving me the yes. So,
But yeah.
so the enterprise lease program has surfaced as kind of a go-to program in the state, but not salted with a lot of history. For example, the city of Sedona, city of Cottonwood started it this year. Golder Ranch Fire District, which is very similar to us, they started it about 2 to 3 years ago. And so I phoned all these folks to find out the why. Why did you lease? And city of Sedona, their primary reason is they enterprise lease what they refer to as their white fleet, or their public works, the city, the sanitary district, all of those vehicles. They don't do a lot of modifications to. They put a Sedona city sticker on the side and then send it out the door. And what they were finding is all of their different divisions were doing their own maintenance on their vehicles. So the primary driver for City of Sedona to go to Enterprise Fleet Solutions was to capture what Enterprise offers in a fleet management software. It's called eFleet, and it helps them track their preventative maintenance and their fleet solutions. And so I talked to Enterprise. I said, well, I have never seen your shop up here to do PMs. They said, no, what we do is we contract with local shops like Sedona Oil and Lube and Sedona Big O Tire. And so then speaking with Mike and based on my knowledge of the district and with Lance's help, like the chief spoke to earlier, about 6 months ago, we did go to a fleet management software that is very similar to eFleet. So that box for me, well, that doesn't buy us anything going with their fleet management because we just purchased the software. Now, Big O and Sedona Oil and Lube, we already have contracts with them to do some of our light fleet work if Mike has an engine in the shop that's got a lot of maintenance going on or an extensive PM or repair. So we've already got those contracts captured, and we already have one source for our fleet maintenance. And so I was like, okay. So then moving on to Golder Ranch, a fire district, so I can understand how they speak. What they did is they moved their capital purchasing around, and they have a lot larger pool vehicle fleet and non-operational fleet. And essentially they moved up a bunch of purchases and had a lot more vehicles they wanted to purchase than they had budgeted for, and that was their primary driver for using a lease solution. And they too have a shop with more employees and do a lot of shared service work for place around them. So they didn't capture the benefit of the eFleet software and service that Enterprise offers. And then Enterprise also offers a lot of add-ons. It's not an extended warranty, but then if you pay more for your lease option, you recognize the opportunity to get discounts on repairs if repairs happen. It's insurance. And a lot of districts that I talked to and agencies I talked to liked that because they didn't have a fleet service shop in-house. So it gave them that capacity. So based on these numbers that Gabe's folks generated, there's the answer to the question you requested last month regarding what's the cost difference, and a little bit about what I discovered doing some research, and I'd be happy to answer any questions beyond that.
Any questions? I'll start
Yeah.
off.
Oh, okay, go.
Go ahead, Troy.
So yeah, I was just curious, obviously the purchase price, buying it cash outright is substantially lower than Enterprise, but not much lower than a lease purchase. So if we purchase it outright, does this include a cost of, let's say, an extended warranty? So that would cover items that a lease purchase would cover? So like if you purchase it, you know how you'll purchase a vehicle, but sometimes the aftermarket items will void that warranty? Do we know anything about that?
To my knowledge, speaking with our representative with Ford Fleet, is the modifications we make to the command vehicles don't void warranty. It's antennas and lights, to my knowledge. And what they are doing in-house is you see some of our command vehicles have a lifted kit on them. We did some more research, and with some of the different manufacturer specs, they're putting on an approved leveling kit to get it off the ground a little bit, but it won't be a lift kit. So we're not doing.
So that won't void it.
We're not doing any modifications particular to that, to suspension or motor work.
So then just another quick question. So it seems like for leasing, it'll be about $5,500 more a year to lease it. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but I was wondering if capturing that extra amount and just doing a straight out purchase would be better is for Sedona Fire. So we're going to be encumbered by a $273,000 bill. Will that serve us, better than having a lease situation that we'll eventually have to buy out again at the end of the lease?
If I may turn over to Gabe
Okay.
for the numbers.
Okay.
I'm
Sorry,
nuts.
sorry.
I'm nuts and bolts and band-aids.
Okay,
He can
sorry.
do.
Yeah, so I think the maintenance question got answered, so we'll move on to this. But essentially, we're looking at purchase price and lease purchase are essentially, all we're saying is we're buying with cash on purchase price. Lease purchase is essentially the way we finance in the government world, okay? We can't get a traditional loan. Like if you go in and buy a vehicle, you get a loan. You don't do a lease, you do a loan. Well, in the government world, we're not allowed to do a loan. We do a lease purchase, of which there is typically $1 or a $0 buyout at the end. So that's how that's structured. So the lease purchase is at the end of the 5-year term, it's basically a 5-year loan. That additional cost between the two is really the interest expense on that.
Oh, okay.
Then finally, your lease program, the enterprise lease program is the example used here. That's more like a traditional lease where at the end there is a buyout.
Right.
And I didn't have the exact numbers for the Transit or the F-550, but for the F-150s, that is about a $4,000 buyout per vehicle. So, and that's not included in that number, but there's that little asterisk down there that there is also an additional amount per vehicle for the buyout at the end of the term if we do want to keep that vehicle.
Question. The justification for leasing would be that you're short on cash and you're spending the money, the cost over 5 years versus just spending the money that you've allocated and getting it over with. So we're not in that situation, so what's the rationale for taking 5 years to buy something that you can just do it now and be done with it and move on to another subject?
So I will say the enterprise lease program has a lot of different reasons on why an organization would choose to go with that versus the other two. And, you know, as Chief Mazulis pointed out, a lot of those things are outside of the financial reasons. But when we look at the purchase price versus the lease purchase, sometimes that decision to make a lease purchase over pay cash is maybe your underlying investment earnings are higher than that of what your interest is. So you have the ability to maintain higher level of funds in there versus what you're earning. Unfortunately, our money's within the county fund and we're not earning better than 3.8%. And I looked back kind of at the last year and we're at about a little over 1% on our investment earnings. So it would cost us more to do that. So therefore it is more of a cash flow position, which, you know, we have the funds set aside to support these purchases, and they were identified as purchases all within our fully funded capital plan.
In comparison, who owns the depreciation on these vehicles? In comparing it with just outright purchase, vehicles depreciate over time, and when you're done with it, you sell it
Right.
for a very low price versus an enterprise situation. I would assume the enterprise absorbs the depreciation, correct?
Well, they don't necessarily absorb the depreciation because they're making a above market revenue on that vehicle over the term of that lease. So then at turn-in standpoint, then yes, you are down to a very low dollar amount, similar to what we would get if we sold the vehicle ourselves. One component that's not captured in here is the fact that Sedona Fire historically doesn't replace these vehicles every 5 years. We hold these vehicles for 10 years. So our useful value over our depreciable value of that asset over its actual useful life is much greater than what we would see under the enterprise lease program.
Which was one of my concerns is first and foremost, I requested a cost analysis knowing full well that, and as I stated it, the purchase may very well prove to be the direction we're gonna go.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, to make a decision on which way we go, you have to have all the information. So that's why we delayed it a month to do what we're doing. With that said, in concert with what Gene has mentioned, is that our fleet is an older fleet. We do keep it longer, and the ability to keep a younger fleet 3 to 5 years, have the turn-in where we don't absorb all the depreciation. In part, the leasing company does, which means we would have a lower maintenance cost per vehicle. They would stay better equipped for not resale, but they don't put out the emissions. What's the word I'm looking for? They say, they say better running, for lack of a better word. But less maintenance, parts, we don't have to buy parts for. So there is a trade-off in some of this. But again, if what we're used to is the purchase and we have it in the budget, what we now have to look forward to is down the road to explore the leasing option as we plan for it, rather than trying to switch midstream in our methodology that we're trying to do now in purchase. So I could only hope that as we move forward that we continue to explore the avenues and tailor some of these things to a younger fleet, to a fleet that we don't keep as long, if that in fact is the trend for Sedona Fire.
And so our fleet replacement program wasn't a bunch of our folks in a room. There are NFPA standards and industry standards specific to replacement schedules, and looking at other light districts, our light fleet, when I refer to pickups and things like that, our light fleet replacement schedule is right in line with what most of our counterparts are doing. And another noteworthy piece of this is for example, the F-550, and I did a lot of work with Lance on this because I wanted to get it right. And my background in fleet maintenance is nil. However, I did work for, I had real jobs before I got the dream job. And I ran a facilities maintenance division on board ship, and we did nothing but pumps, valves, and all of our stuff. And then I worked for a contractor with Motorola, so I'm not just dipping my toe in the water. I have some conceptual understanding of the preventive maintenance, the increased costs over time. But speaking with Lance, the F-550, that's a 15-year vehicle. Those fleet maintenance vehicles, they go to do work, and you beat up the cabinets on them, and you run the crane, and it lasts a long time. The F-150s, that's where I got in the weeds, because Ford Fleet, which I didn't cover in here, because the prices are a lot more, and here's why. Ford Fleet does a run a couple times a year where they run their police cars, you see, and when you buy an Interceptor model, you get all the upgrades to it. And they have a similar program for fire type vehicles, which is the SSV. But speaking with Ford Fleet, the prices are the same as our state contract. Arizona State has negotiated a phenomenal rate. And the key to those F-150s is what we've seen in our organization is they have a front line or daily use shelf life of 10 to 12 years. And then when they get some dents and scratches in them, we kick them off to our wildland division, and then they use them for another few years, and then now they're contractually billable to the state and feds. So we recover some costs on those vehicles at their end of life, and then it hurts less when a guy hits a tree stump with a 12-year-old truck. And we've got one that's a 99, and it still runs all over the country. So. And with the F-150s, the other noteworthy thing is it's about $10,000 to outfit one of those with light sirens, radios, and things. And say you do a 5-year lease on an F-150, and you do have some residual value. Just for numbers, it's $30,000 truck, and say it's worth 15. Say you cut it in half after 5 years, and none of the lights are sun faded, and the center console works with Ford's new redesign that they do in 5 years, where they change something in the cabin. We can pull all the equipment out with some new wires and stuff, so our new upfit cost is reduced by half, and then we cut half off our cost. There's still a cost for replacement in 5 years, and I'm really comfortable with our replacement plan based on what other districts are doing and success they've had with the command type vehicles. And the reason I broke the BACs out this time for this presentation, it's not on one, is speaking with Ford Fleet, working with Lance, and working with Enterprise. The vehicle that makes the most sense to look at leasing if you wanted to do an experiment would be the Transit Van, because we're going to add an inverter to it so Jeremy can power up and do computer work in the field. Enterprise did indicate they're not big fans of onesie twosies. They're multi-vehicle purchase, and they're looking. Enterprise is getting going with this, and they're looking at getting into the ambulance market and the fire truck market. So we're not going to discount the benefit of leasing, but all the research staff has done, it doesn't indicate that leasing at this time would be the best route. But
I would concur. with Dave that, as we move forward, and what have you, that we continue to look at the value of leasing. Certainly, not frontline apparatus at this point, but observing what's going on around the country with other similar departments, and as well as those other vehicles, what have you, that are light-duty trucks and so on. As you mentioned, the van, good idea, to collect data to see how it works. And by collecting data, I'm not talking about spending more money than we need to.
No,
So,
I'd rather not spend more money than we need to. Kind of proud of us being pretty good stewards of the taxpayers' dollar, and I think we've done a good job. And ultimately, we were approached about getting this fleet software, the RTA, and I was at Software Max with our new finance software and EMS software, and I was like, okay, great, sounds good. But they got me, they hooked me. I went to the training and learned a lot, and it tracks everything really well. But the problem with that is, in order to track data, you have to collect data. In order to collect data, you have to have time. And so now that we've got people up to speed with the data and we start collecting it, I hope that in a year we can have some good reportables to you guys.
Super, appreciate that. Quickly, you mentioned the name Lance. Can you quantify who that is?
I'm sorry. I know you know, but I get it. So Lance Waltrip, retired fleet manager for the federal government, by happenstance met our previous assistant chief, Jeff Pichura, and became acquaintances. In addition to his experience with federal fleet management, Lance is a big car nerd, and he knows a lot about a lot, and he's very passionate about it, and he's blessed us with giving us some of his time as a volunteer, and afforded us the opportunity to retool some stuff and learn some the bigger picture stuff with our fleet management, and that's who I refer to when I say Lance, and you just bounce a lot of ideas off him and things like that.
Super, thank you, appreciate that. Does the board have any other questions?
Well, I had a comment. First, I want to thank you for the time you've put into this, because you were asked to do it so that the board could make a good decision, and you certainly did it rather thoroughly. The cost of leasing is more than $100,000 more. You know, it's obviously a very expensive way to go at this time. I'm hearing that possibly we have one vehicle that we could look at leasing in the future, but that perhaps we have to work with a bigger volume to do it. So given that and all the other reasons that you've shared as to why SFD works better purchasing rather than leasing at this time.
If I want to clarify that statement.
Yes.
So specific to enterprise lease program, what I meant by one vehicle it's not that it doesn't make sense, it's just that the enterprise leasing solution with the package and the software and everything else, bottom line is we'd be paying for them to track one vehicle's PMs when we have a software that's doing the rest of our fleet. And so speaking with their representative, and I am meeting with him in a couple weeks to really pour over our fleet and get some stuff going, but just to have one vehicle that's a van that drives around district, it wouldn't capture usable data in my mind. You know, it'd be barely interesting, you know, and it's relative to the total purchase package, you know, that it's a small purchase. It's not an outfitted vehicle.
Right.
So
but thank you. And also, you know, because you were asked to look at lease purchase, also that particular element, I just want to also concur, you know, here with my fellow board member that we do have a capital plan where we do save. And the reason we do that is so we don't have to pay interest, at least on items of this cost. When it comes to building fire stations, I think that's a different matter. But a whole purpose of having a capital plan is to avoid that kind of outlay for interest. And it's very worthwhile to do that, and that's why we're dedicated to doing that. So thanks again, Chief Mazulish. You really provided us with the information we need to make a decision here.
Anybody else? Gene? Joy? Again, Chief Mazulis, thank you very much, and staff also for putting this together. A lot of time was put into it, and the board truly appreciates that and allows us to make the decisions that we need to make. So with that said, and we did talk about 2 requisition orders. So with the first one, let me move forward here.
Yeah, I can do that if
Okay,
you'd
you
like.
want to make the motion?
Yeah,
This
I
is-
move to approve requisition number 9132 for purchase order up to the amount of $247,483.56.
Mhm.
Uh,
Two, yeah.
Yeah, to Sanderson Ford for the purchase of the fleet vehicles. And then the next one.
We'll do one at a time.
Sure.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Requisition 9132 is approved. The second requisition that we alluded to, that we discussed, is requisition number 9133. 9133. Let me
I
scroll
can-
down to that. You want to read that one again?
Yeah, sure.
Also?
I move to approve requisition 9133 for a purchase order up to the amount of $26,488.77 to Sanderson Ford for the purchase of fleet vehicles.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Requisition number 9133 is approved. Okay. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the discussion possible action for requisition 9135 for a purchase order up to the amount of $62,331.55 to 89A for the purchase of equipment and installation for keyless facility access and security, and that is presented by Buzz Lakowski.
All right. So, I apologize. Which one was first? Keyless? I grabbed them
Keyless, yes.
both and then
You
I
have them both?
swapped
Okay.
Okay,
The
gotcha.
keyless.
Okay. So, just a little background. We've attempted to, several years ago, sort of piecemeal a project like this with, to use Ed's terms, onesies, twosies, without a comprehensive look at what we really need as far as security and access. And since then, the technology and frankly the availability of technology driving prices down made this a lot more feasible for us now. Security here is a paramount importance. We are a little brass key fire department right now. And without alarming too many people, the key accountability over the last 50 years it could use some improvement. And so one key point is we can turn these things off and on if your longevity as board members came to an end or Ed got fired, we could turn his key off and they wouldn't be able to have access. That's one key thing, and so the accountability piece for us is huge. Currently, I supervise Captain Angel Morales, who's in charge of he's our like sort of locksmith, in-house locksmith as a project, and he is forever rekeying and pulling his hair out as we sort of discover who has access that we wouldn't want to have access. It's nothing criminal. It's just some of our partners have been afforded access to certain things that nowadays wouldn't be the way. Sort of good old boy kind of mojo with that. So what this does is it adds 27 access points at various stations, including one of our tower sites. We're hoping to have success in that realm and move forward and do the other tower sites as well. Some of those are very remote. And those locks and keys, there's always problems on those. So Captain Morales drives to the top of the mountain to change a lock and things like that. So let's see. There's a tracking mechanism with some software that allows us to see who came and who went. I could turn it on for vent. This is a cool thing for me. since I'm trying to embrace the facilities world. If we have someone come in, let's say they're going to put window blinds in, we can issue them a card, and they're supposed to be out there by 2, and that card turns off at 2, and they can't get back in. These are modern things that seem probably to some people, like NAU as an example, seems very blasé. It's pretty much the system that when you go in a hotel, we're going to have that now. So we can turn it off and on, which is super helpful. Initially, these will be exterior doorways, with the exception of a few. The keypad, the fickle keypad, between the bay and admin, that will get an upgrade. The access between the bay and at Station 3 and sort of the classroom area, because we have quite a few events and people sort of renting out that space that probably shouldn't have access to the rest of our stuff. Little things like that will be huge improvements. Technologically wise, I don't know if you want me to get into that. It uses some existing hardware, which is why the requisition probably dances around all over the place. And you can't really add up 27 things because some of it uses existing, some of it is a trim package. It uses sort of a router system. So it's wired to various sort of hotspots within each station. A station like this would have 2, maybe 3. We're not quite sure with all the brick walls that travel. And then each individual access point is wireless and communicates with that sort of router, that hotspot. It touches every station, including Station 6. The hardware will be changed to this newer system that comes at some cost for a pretty new building. But to get everyone on the same page and all in the same system, it seems worthwhile. Yes, sir.
How does it work when you lose power?
Yeah, there's and I knew this was going to come up, and I couldn't find the exact time that it's sort of like capacitance a little bit. It has the capability of staying charged beyond. It is not a like catastrophic event like an earthquake. It won't stay on for
Forever.
duration, days and days. But the keyed system we currently use will still be there.
Oh,
So it won't forego any of that. We'll still have key access. But our hope in the future, spoiler alert, is to then, after this works, re-key all those doors with a more modest program instead of hundreds of keys out there, re-key after this is in place, because the need will be lessened. So yeah, it is electric. It does. The tech fails, then we can revert back to the key. Yes.
Well, I think this is a great idea. Personally, more recent events have caused concern for safety for firefighters. The recent shooting down below, what have you, at a fire station, and so on. So, and a lot of times this stuff isn't shared with the public. That information is lost somewhere on page 12, next to the classifieds. So a program like this, what have you, can only enhance
Sure.
the security and safety of our personnel.
I agree.
Chief, the status of Fire Station 4 in the not-so-distant future being rebuilt, is this something that we would want to hold off on Fire Station 4, or is this something projected to go into effect not till after Fire Station 4 is built? How does Fire
Yeah.
Station 4 fit into this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that I had with Chief Coyle, and not pertaining to this project, but a little bit with Chief Troutwine just this week while we were discussing something else. I personally think it is worthwhile. We limited the amount of access points there purposefully, so we didn't put them everywhere. So there's 5. That includes some server space that is currently secured that'll just be changed to this new program. The key with Station 4, from my perspective, and I know Chief Coyle and hopefully Chief Troutwine just from this one conversation, is that if earliest we could be talking 2 years for a new station, all that while we would have really not unlimited access, but an access issue that we'd have to deal with other ways. That would be my take on it. So I think we should move forward. I think it boils down, if I remember correctly, $1,500 a door, something like that. That's the larger piece being installation, of course, on that requisition. So for me, that's worth it to secure it for the next couple years and without unforeseen delays in addition to that. But it was a factor for sure. Everything with Station 4, which was what we talked about, I talked about with Chief Troutwine, was, what's your take on this? What do we fix? What don't we fix? You don't want the place to fall down if we're looking over the horizon. But the fact is, our folks live there today. They're operating in there with, HIPAA requirements and all these other things, expensive equipment, narcotics, things like that. So in my opinion, it's worth it for now.
And last question I have for you is, a member working at Fire Station 1 works overtime at Fire Station 6. Is his key going to work over there? Or?
Yes. It won't be that limiting.
Okay.
But the cool part is you can say, hey, we're rekeying and whoosh, new keys, just like that. Instead of, I have to go get Angel to go in his little machine, in his little workshop with his little glasses.
So you could rekey the whole district at,
Yeah, it would be
at the swipe of a key
correct.
and be done.
Yep.
If
I could
that
do it
is
all
anything.
in one. I could do a shift in one shift, just driving from station to station, reissuing it.
Well, this looks incredibly important for both safety and security
Right.
of our staff and our equipment. You wrote up an excellent, on the financial perspective.
I may not have written that.
Oh, okay, excuse me. Who wrote
I-
this up?
I wrote what I thought it was.
Oh.
I imagine someone else.
Well, it's a nice description. I think the public who may be listening to this would
I did write that,
appreciate the fact that we did get 3 separate quotes and the thinking that went into the selection of the company that we're
Oh.
choosing, if this is passed by the board.
Yeah, it's 8.
89A.
89. Is it 89A?
A.
Yeah, 89A. We've it's relational and service driven as a piece of it, and their price was within $2,000, $3,000,
pretty
something like
close.
that. In fact, when we told them this was actually moving to the board, they said, "Let us requote this," because we had started this, I don't know, a year ago. It stopped for other reasons, and then it was going to get rolled into some of the other projects, and then beginning again, we got 3 new quotes, and they said, "Hold on a minute, some stuff changed," so it actually came down, which I was really pleased. But it's a service thing with them. They actually are, so this is a Stanley, which I believe is the parent company that owns Best Locks
Oh,
and this
Major
WIQ system. So these folks get trained directly by the Stanley rep that we've worked with forever. And some of that insight, like, hey, I train these guys. They actually know the product. They put this in elsewhere, and it's worked. It's been successful. The insight from sort of vendor to installer, if you will, or sub vendor was very important. I mean, that's a good point in my opinion. And Angels as well, Captain Morales, he's worked with them a lot. He calls, they answer. He calls, they come. Very, very responsive to our needs so far. And we're kind of small potatoes in the key access world. We really are. These same people do every campus of Yavapai College. They do NAU. They do hospitals. If a hospital doesn't have its own in-house. So for them to come and respond to us with, hey, we have 10 doors that need help, it's very telling to me. So part of it's service, and then the price came in line, which I was very pleased about.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So, in this quote, are we including servicing? I know that we have the continuity with 89A, we've worked them before, but will this include servicing it up to X amount of years? Replacement software, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't answer definitively,
Okay.
especially about the replacement software.
I mean, I just was wondering as far as a cost perspective on if either way, with either
Yeah.
company, I know 89A is the one that we want to use, but so with IT changing over, like every 18 months, everything gets switched over. So will we have the capacity to go with it without spending an exorbitant amount of money, I guess, is my question. I don't need actual numbers, just, you know.
So, you have to excuse me, so the sort of wireless internet-y end of it, that's our end. So any advances or changes in technology, we will be running from our servers with an IP address to each one of these things. That would be on us or
Oh,
whomever we use that we're
Okay.
running that. As far as time, and I apologize, I don't know. As
No,
far as
it's
the devices themselves, this system and each component of it is the newest thing out.
okay.
And I know that's very vague, very nebulous, but as far as costs in the future, I don't know.
I imagine it comes with a warranty, though.
Yeah, wow, that's a really great question too. I really imagine it does. I don't mean to be flippant about that.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah, I imagine it does. I can definitely find out for sure. Yeah, reputable companies with long-standing international, companies or whatever. I imagine there is a warranty on the product. Hopefully, we won't adulterate it while we use it to void that warranty. I can definitely find out. So my apologies on those two questions.
Thank you, Chief. It, again, it is looks like the right thing to do at the right time for the money that we're going to be spending on it. So what I need at this point in time, unless there's any other questions for the Chief, I need a motion one way or the other. Anybody like to give that?
I'll make a motion to a purchase order for $91.35, for the purchase order up to the amount of $62,331.55 to 89A for the purchase of equipment and installation for keyless facility access and security.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Requisition number 9135 is approved. The next item on the agenda is discussion possible action for requisition 9136 for the purchase order up to the amount of $117,667.50 to CS Group for the replacement and relocation of evaporative coolers for Fire Station 3. Chief Bukowski.
Okay, so currently, Station 3, which is we're speaking of the Bay Area, 19-foot tall ceilings, about 6,000 square feet. So I went to public school. You could do the math on the cubic feet needed for that. But it's quite a bit. And right now there are 4 what I would term as industrial. These are not your mom's swamp cooler. They're massive. They're 5 feet across, about 8 feet deep. There's 4 of them on the mezzanine area, the storage area on the north side of Station 3. So over the years, the last 20 years, because that station is, I think, just about 20 years old,
Yeah.
they have failed repeatedly because there's water in there, and the pans have failed, and then they had took a little while to really find that out. This isn't an area that, especially then, maybe 5-10 years ago, people really went to. The only thing that was up there was the coolers and the water heater. Now we use it for some other things, but the water would drip out, and it really kind of like spalled the concrete of that decking that they're resting on, and then poured down into the EMS room, the technical rescue supply room, and a couple of the other like tool maintenance rooms. So that's sort of problem 1. Water above other things is not a great idea. The efficiency of these 4 units was always in question. And even though it's a robust system, right away as they failed, we realized we didn't need all 4. So that was an interesting piece to move that volume. I don't know why. So this will take part of that into account with some new flow engineering with our the CS group who does our work here all the time. We're only needing to do 2, the new ones, so that's a pretty cool piece. But back to the problems, they keep failing. We have re-poured self-leveling floor up there, repaired the pans, harvested parts off of 2 of these coolers to keep 2 running for years and years. This was a piece, revamping all of that along with all the HVAC at Stage 3 was a piece that we had looked at in some other endeavors. So kind of put this on hold, which is why it's coming after yet another flood and leak that happened early this summer. It is a budgeted, known thing that we've attempted to sort of figure out how to do, and this seems to be the best option, is just getting them off that area, figuring out what the rest of that decking looks like, and moving them to the exterior. One of the cool parts is, A, it won't flood anymore, but two is more efficient than 4, especially if you're not using 2 of them, but you're just sort of constantly fixing them and feeding them.
Question, these are swamp coolers, just like we have at the house, just
Yeah,
gigantic.
They're huge. The pad, I know all the pads, like on Adobe or Mastercoat's very thick now. These are very thick. In fact, the current ones had to be hand cut because they were obsolete almost immediately. So yeah, they're very big. This would probably be 2 to 3 times the cubic feet moving than the one on a normal home, if I'm right, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Well, this has been a problem since I've been here,
Yeah.
and we're revisiting this, really. Thank you for the information.
I am curious, just knowing what happens when our humidity goes up during our, used to have monsoon season.
At one time.
Yes, and swamp coolers don't work as well then? How did we choose swamp cooler over
Yeah,
refrigerative?
I couldn't tell you the why of folks before me. Each one of our apparatus bays is cooled with a swamp cooler. They're not air conditioned with your typical air conditioning. There's a heater or a series of heaters, depends, and then swamp coolers in each one. Even Station 6, that's how they engineered it and how they chose to go with it. And in maybe July 20th and beyond, it's just hot in there, and it moves air,
It does.
albeit very humid air. So the effectiveness goes down when the dew point goes up. So yeah, I don't know why, but even Station 6, that's how they designed it and spec'd it. Yeah, I imagine because when you open the door, all your air conditioning goes out. It probably takes half the day to cool it again. So
And
they're
swamp
running all
coolers
the
are
time.
based on the idea that something has to be open anyhow.
Correct. And this building's already it has pressure louvers so that when air comes in, the louvers open.
Yeah.
So
Can
set
I
up
ask
for
a,
all that.
I'm
but-
so sorry. Can
Yeah,
I
yeah.
ask just a quick question?
Sure.
So in this rec, how much more do you think it would cost to pull power to the units?
So I spoke with the electrician yesterday, and he said, provided it was, he's going to get us a hard quote, of course, but it's about a 12-foot run vertically, and maybe 4 feet horizontally, and anything under 20. The existing power's there, same power, no change in amps, or it doesn't go from 110 to 220 or anything like that. It would be. He told me, please don't say this is a hard number, but it was about $500 per unit. So
Okay, so.
1,000. I said, can I safely say not higher than 2,000? He said, oh yeah.
Okay, great, that's great.
Yeah.
That's good to know, okay.
But we'll have the quote and
So that'll be
follow the chain.
a requisition further down the road after, subsequent to this one here,
The
for the pulling the power.
the power, I could have the power done under my current spending authority if
Okay.
it comes in as
Okay.
those.
Okay.
And that's sort of how I plan. I think in the future, as I learn how to do this better, through the expertise of Chief
I
Troutline.
think you're doing a great job.
I could talk about anything. That part's not the problem. We'll include that, even if it is from another vendor or whatever, so you guys have a more holistic view of what's going on. So, moving forward.
Okay, so do we have any other questions? Okay. Chief, was there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, it's much better in here than what I was talking about. So if you read it, then you probably know it all.
And besides just the moving air and cooling the apparatus bays for fire engines, what else is in there that would cause us to want to cool that area?
Well, what we ran into in the past, The EMS room actually has AC in it. The TRT room is on that same line of ducts. It's also air conditioned, as well as the SCBA refilling bunker, if you will. What we found last year or maybe the year before, was the radios and things within the bay and in the apparatus quit functioning because it got so hot in there.
Okay.
And so we got these portable units and just pointed them at the apparatus with the doors open and towards the charging. We moved charging radios into other areas. And so it was some of that stuff. And we haven't seen the flip side of any damage due to the humidity being introduced either. So
Right, okay.
it's that, especially stage 3, it's all just one big brick and concrete
It's just-
thing. So that's kind of really all that's in there is the apparatus and some miscellaneous equipment.
And in your bid process from the vendor, was there any indication that perhaps air conditioning was a better choice rather than swamp coolers, or did that come up?
Not in the AC versus swamp.
Evaporative
We
coolers.
talked about better delivery through drop ducting to where we really want it and things like that. But it, I don't know what, like I said, the cubic feet is of that. I don't even know that that's,
Possible.
they would even entertain that,
Okay.
frankly.
Just too
I
big an area.
didn't, but
Area.
that
It
is,
is too
there's a huge space. It's
Yeah.
like Banquarm Ballpark, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
We could. It just
It's
wasn't on
very
our
expensive.
radar for that.
All right. With that said, I need a motion.
May I make the
Sure.
motion today? Thank you. Or on this one? Okay, I move to approve requisition number 9136 for a purchase order up to the amount of $117,667.50 to CS Group for the replacement and relocation of evaporative coolers for Sedona Fire District Station 3.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Requisition number 9136 is approved. Okay. And thank you, Chief, for your presentation. Okay, next item on the agenda is our fire marshal safety message.
Thank you, Board Chair. Before I get into the safety message, I did want to touch on something that Chief Troutwine mentioned earlier, is the upcoming Fire Prevention Week coming up in October. That falls every week in October that October 9th falls on. So it may be the first week, maybe the second week, or excuse me, second or third week, depending on how that all works out. But for Fire Safety Week, we do have a number of presentations planned around the district. Most of them are to the, many of the school students will be getting the Milo and Moxie fire safety program. We are having the open house pancake breakfast. Ed and I cook a mean pancake, and we're planning on having blueberries again this year. So you'll have your choice between blueberry and regular pancakes. It's going to be getting out the fire safety message on Firewise stuff. We're hoping to get Smokey Bear there, so we'll see who all shows up. We're still making those arrangements. Anyway, that's coming up, and we hope to see you all there. Fire safety message this month is pets and fire safety. Coming up this weekend at Posse Ground Park from 9 until noon is Sedona Wag Fest. I am going to be out of town, and I'm completely bummed out that I'm not going to be there because we went last year, took our dog. It's great. If you have pets, go to Wag Fest. Take your dog down there. They've got food samples, everything. It's really a good event. We're going to be out there getting the fire safety message out, and we're also going to be doing some demonstrations with our Fido bag that we carry for resuscitation if we happen to pull a dog out of a house fire. So we're going to be doing that. But along those lines, every year over 500,000 pets are affected by fire, with an estimated 1,000 fires a year that are actually started by pets. I've had 2 of those in my own experience. Leaving, if you've got a dog that's a counter surfer, I was on a fire once where they had left the pizza box up on top of the stove, and the dog decided to surf and got the pizza out of the box, but the box was still up there, but it turned the knob on the stove. So don't set things on your stove, and especially if you have a dog that might be inclined to try to eat that pizza. Another thing is candles in the house. Dogs' tails sometimes knock candles over. Cats, you've seen them all knock the vase over, and they do the same thing with candles occasionally. Loose wires. Puppies like to chew things. They like to chew wires. If you have loose wires around, try to hide those, put them out in the corner, keep the puppy away from them. Cats are also notorious for doing that. The other things you should think about with your pets is the evacuation. If you're planning for an evacuation, don't forget food, medication, kennels, those things for your pets. When you're hiking with your pets, make sure that you take plenty of water for them as well. We have to hydrate, they need to hydrate. And last, and probably the hardest thing to do, if your house is on fire, never go back inside for your pet. We would hate to have a human injury as well as an injury to a pet. That's all I have.
Well, thank you very much and welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
With that said, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.